Welcome everybody to the Monday Motivation Spotlight. I'm Lesley Kaplan, welcoming you here every Monday together with our co-host ACI, whether you're joining us live or whether you're watching the recording. For those of you that are new and that it's the first time you're joining, I'd like to tell you a little bit very quickly what the Monday Motivation Spotlight is. It was born 1 year ago. We started 2 weeks after the October 7th war. And in response to what we felt was the need for inspiration, motivation for Am Yisrael on the one hand, and on the other hand, to give exposure to amazing, incredible, inspiring Israelis, business owners, organizations, and individuals. We've been meeting every single week live, and every week we spotlight a different person who can give us inspiration. Today, and I'm going to spotlight him right now, we have a very special guest who we're very honored that he's with us today, Rav Doron Perez. Thank you so much for being with us, Rav Doron, in a special Erev Rosh Hashanah podcast. So most of you are familiar with who Rav Doron is, but for those of you that are not, or even if you know him, let me share with you a little bit about who and what Rav Doron Perez is. Firstly, he's the executive chairman of World Mizrachi and also chairman of the Department for Religious Affairs of the World Zionist Organization. You'll hear from his accent. He comes from the same background as me. I've been in Israel 35 years. He's been in Israel, he said 10 years, but he made Aliyah before. So prior to that, he was very involved in the South African Jewish community for 15 years as the rabbi of the South African Mizrachi Movement, senior rabbi of Mizrachi Shul, and also the head of Yeshiva College schools. He's authored 2 books. He has a BA in Jewish education and in Jewish history. And more recently, he became in the spotlight, sadly, due to the tragic killing of his son, Captain Daniel Perez, in the war on October 7th, and who is sadly still being held in Gaza. And as I was saying to Rav Doron, before we officially went on the podcast and went live, never mind, he's garnered our respect for everything else that he's done. But with the tragedy that they had, he came out in the spotlight as being supportive, positive, inspiring at a time when his family was going through the trauma and needing the inspiration. He came out and was inspiring us in his positive words and achdut and unity. And we thank you for that, Rabbi Perez, and all, sadly are with you during this time and are with you on your side. So please share with us on this auspicious day, a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah, some words of wisdom, and you have many to share and inspiration, and also share with us your journey, Aliyah, maybe South African Jewry leading into you coming into Israel and your family story.
Thank you, Lesley. Apologize to all the non-South Africans. This is being dominated by South Africans and South African accents this morning. And it's nice to be with all of you. I've got a little bit of a cold and struggling a little bit with my voice, but so forgive me for that. I made Aliyah twice. I've made Aliyah twice. The first time when I was 18 years old. Well, I'll go back. The name Perez is actually Peretz. My father, almost all the Peretzes without exception are Sephardim, Moroccan. My father's Moroccan born. He was born in 1939 in Casablanca and moved with his family as a teenager in the mid-50s to Israel, as so much of the Moroccan Aliyah did. And in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, my father somehow made it to a visit to Johannesburg, South Africa, ended up, long story short, meeting my mother and eventually getting married. And therefore, I grew up in South Africa in the 70s and 80s as somebody who had a Sephardi father, which was not so common in South Africa in the 1970s, as you know, an Ashkenazi community. But I grew up very much. My mother's maiden name is Geselter. My father, the late Louis Geselter, there's 2 Louis Geselters. There's a urologist, should live and be well. He's also a family member. And there's my grandfather, the late Louis Geselter, who was known as Mr. Maccabi. He built South African Jewish sport. And therefore, I grew up in this family of this very Jewish sporting family, traditional South Africans, with my father, who was a Sephardi, and my mother, Ashkenazi, but grew up like all South Africans in an Ashkenazi environment. By the age of 18, our whole family had become more observant. We were like traditional South Africans, but eventually there was a young rabbi then in Waverley Shul. His name was Rabbi Barry Marcus. He's in London today, and he was involved in our families slowly becoming a little bit more observant and then going to a religious day school. And slowly our whole family became more religiously observant. And that led me to decide to go on a gap year to Israel, as was the case of many of us. And during my gap year in Israel, I studied in a yeshiva called Beit El in the Shomron. I decided that 1 year was not enough. I should stay a second year. And I said, you know what, even 2 years isn't enough. I'll stay 1 more year. I was going to go back to South Africa and study medicine. That was the aim. But then I decided to stay in Israel, and my parents made Aliyah in 1991. That was the year of the Gulf War. Those who remember the Gulf War. My younger brother Ilan had also just come to join me in yeshiva, and now my parents had 2 sons in Israel, and they were always thinking of making Aliyah, coming back, my father. So we came officially in the late 80s, early 90s. Our whole family was in Israel. So I really made Aliyah as an 18-year-old then. I went to the army through the Hesder program, through a yeshiva called Oret Zion, and eventually met my wife, Shelley, who herself is South African from Cape Town, got married, had our son, Jonathan, our oldest son, who was born in 1999. And we then got a call from friends of ours in South Africa who wanted to rebuild the religious Zionist movement in South Africa for the Bnei Akiva graduates. And these were people all around my age in our late 20s, and said, Doron, we really want to, I was Lawrence in South Africa, I'm now Doron. We want to sort of re-energize religious Zionism for the sort of Bnei Akiva graduates. So after a lot of cajoling, I said, I'll come for 2 years back to South Africa. My wife said, Doron, I don't understand. You know, I just made Aliyah. We got married 2 years ago. I'm just learning Hebrew. And we've got our son, Jonathan, and now you want to go to South Africa for 2 years of shlichut or 3 years and then come back to Israel. Sounds like a lot of upheavals. But anyway, we decided to go back to South Africa, and our 2 to 3 year shlichut became a 15-year shlichut. So our young son, Jonathan, who was then 4 months old when we went to shlichut, by the time we came back in 2014, almost exactly 10 years ago in July, 10 years ago, our son, Jonathan, who was born in Israel, was now 15 years old. Our second son, Daniel, was born in, the other children were born in South Africa. He was 13. We came 2 months after his bar mitzvah, and our other 2 daughters, Adina and Shira, were both 10 and 6 respectively. And we made Aliyah, as I said, 10 years ago, and I had the privilege of being nominated and then selected to be the chief executive of the World Mizrachi Movement, with the aim of sort of what I had done in South Africa, in playing a role in trying to invigorate as much as possible a community deeply committed to Judaism and Torah, and deeply committed to the land and state of Israel. You know, the values of Mizrachi have always been the land. It's been the Jewish people, the Torah, the people of Israel, the Torah of Israel, and the land and state of Israel. So, and based on these values, I've tried my best to, there was a measure of success in South Africa. So the aim was to do a similar thing in Israel, and we came back 10 years ago. Our son Daniel was the child who we thought would have the hardest Aliyah. You know, coming back with kids who are 13 and 15, well, 6, 10, 13, 15, not a simple time to make Aliyah. And we thought Daniel, who was a very, very socially based child, he was finding it the hardest to leave South Africa because he had so many friends, and he was really not comfortable to leave South Africa. So we thought he'd have the hardest Aliyah, but incredibly, as is often the case, we got it 100% wrong. He had the easiest Aliyah. Literally on day one, he met two chevra who are still close friends of his today. He was like a fish in water. He just got on so well. And in his 10 years in Israel, or 9.5 years until October 7th, he just integrated incredibly well. He was the biggest socialite you can imagine. I'd often give the example of his social prowess. I would see there's a game that if you have teenage sons, you might know. It's called Fortnite. It's a game of teams. If you do know and are nodding, I commiserate with you. And it's a game which these kids get so engrossed in and play these sort of teams of shooting games where they sort of play with people, friends around the world. You can play with anyone, as online games are. So I joke and say that during Daniel's grade 12 year in Israel, the only subject that he did exceptionally in was Fortnite. He knocked the ball out the park in Fortnite. I'm just joking, it wasn't a subject, but it's the only thing he really did religiously and diligently during his grade 12 year. And when I would listen to him playing Fortnite, once at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard him shouting at the top of his voice. So I went into his room and I see him playing this game Fortnite. So I sat for the next half an hour, and he's playing with South African friends with the thickest South African accent. He'd been now 5 years in Israel, with the thickest South African accent, with all of his South African friends. Guys, do this. Boys, go here. Do cover me here. Go there. Then the game ends. He goes to the bathroom, comes back, and in 2 minutes later, he's playing with all of his Israeli Sephardi friends with the thickest Israeli accent, and he could flit between social groups. I'd say during the Shiva, I'm not exaggerating if I say around 30 people came to tell us that Daniel was their best friend. People religious and not religious, and guys and girls that he had met in the army who just would. One girl came, she was from a place called Hoshaya up north, Dati, like Yeshuv. She said whenever she was in the base on Shabbat, she would always see WhatsApp to see if Daniel was there, because she said he was such an amazing Ben Siach, somebody you could just talk to and everything. And he said they always just, loved having him around, a person who really, really, really invested in friendships. So even though that he was the person who his aliyah was the hardest for him, because he didn't want to leave his friends. It's funny, like for 6 months after we decided to make Aliyah, in the 6 months prior to Aliyah, every picture of Daniel with his friends, you see this like sad, moping face, all like sad. But he literally was like a fish in water, and he kept up all of his friendships from South Africa, and made incredible friends here, friends from the army, friends from high school, stum friends he met here and there. Daniel also was a person who loved extreme sport, all types of extreme sport. The one that he really invested in was something called wakeboarding. It's a type of surfing, but you do it in a lake. There's a lake in South Tel Aviv where you can do it, called Lake Begin, Park Begin, and he just loved. He was there the whole time in the holidays before he went to Mechina, and he just also made friends from there. And really one of these ADHD sort of adrenaline junkie kids who just absolutely loved life and invested in it very, very much. So comes October the 7th, Simchat Torah, Daniel is an officer in the tank corps. He had to fight to get into the tank corps. He wanted to be in Golani. That was his older brother Yonatan was in an officer. Yonatan did his there and ended up signing on in the army, and he's a Mempei, a company commander in the paratroopers. Daniel said, no, that's not for him. He wants to be a soldier in Sayeret Golani, in the elite Golani brigade. That's where he wanted to go. And unfortunately, that didn't happen because he tore his anterior cruciate ligament in a wakeboarding accident, tore his meniscus as well. To cut a long story short, his profile was dropped to 45. After his operation to 65, he fought with the army till they moved it to 72. So at least in his mind, he could do something combat, which was tanks. And he absolutely loved the tank. He's very clever, and he loved the complexity of the tank. He loved the power of the tank. It also appealed to his sort of very energetic nature. And it was a great mix of both power and intellect. And he became an officer, a commander, an officer. And comes October 7th, Simchat Torah, he's based with his crew on the Gaza border. On that day, some of you may know the story, so I won't tell the story in great detail. But on that day, our two older children, both boys, Yonatan and Daniel, were both officers in the army. Daniel was based in Nachal Oz, and Yonatan was at home with his then fiancée, now his wife, thank God, Galia, in our home in Yad Binyamin. By the end of the day, we had the difficult situation of having our older son, Yonatan, lying in Soroka Hospital, having been shot in the leg, and our younger son, Daniel, missing in action, just missing. We didn't know where he was. Nutak Kesher, that's the word that they used. They got, So it was a very, very difficult situation. Turns out that Daniel ended up fighting for 2.25 hours in and around Nachal Oz. We know this because we listened to the black box of the tank, which allowed us to understand what he had done during that day, even though he had been missing for 2 weeks and then presumed taken captive. And even till today, we had, last night, the most updated sort of intelligence update from the intelligence officer who's dealing with Daniel's case, and not very promising in that they still don't know exactly where he is. And we all know as the war moves up north, there's less focus on Gaza. But but literally since the afternoon of the first day, they don't know much about what happened. Daniel was declared missing in action, then Nehedar, missing. Then 2 weeks later, thought to be captive, and then confirmed taken captive. After a month, we were told that the uniform and blood that they found in and around the tank was unfortunately Daniel's, and therefore we knew he had been injured. That was a very difficult time to know, because I always felt that if Daniel got through the first day, he would be able to survive. He's a strong young man, and I felt if he was okay on the first day, Hamas need him. Yes, it might be a long haul. He's a male soldier officer, but they need him. He's an important asset, and we felt that there was a good chance he'd be okay. What happened was that, so it was very difficult to know that he'd been injured, and the signs over the next few months were never encouraging. So there was always a chance that he had been badly injured or, God forbid, killed. And we were told on day 163, on the 17th of March, Zayin Adar, between Zayin and Chet Adar Bet, that he unfortunately had been killed on October 7th. And this was based on footage that had been seen in Sajaya, videos that he was already around 12 o'clock in noon deceased and in Sajaya, and it was unequivocal, it was clear, the evidence. So that was very, very hard. Of course, after all, so much hope. But I will say that where we were, in inverted commas, lucky, is that Daniel, the fact that we had Daniel's uniform. I mean, we didn't have it. The army had blood on his uniform. On the one hand, that was so hard for us because we had to deal with the fact that he was injured. But the silver lining for us is we thankfully had something to bury. We're one of the people who are lucky, in inverted commas, that we actually have a grave. And even though Daniel's body is not in the grave, it's not in the grave, unfortunately, but we do have a grave. My wife and I went to Har Herzl yesterday. We go every week. And as hard as it is, at least we've got a place to go, and that's comforting. A lot of people don't, and that's challenging. In our tank, one of the tank members' name is Itai Chen from Netanya. They don't have a body. They don't have any blood. So although that there was no sign of him being injured, and they were hoping that he was alive, they heard 1 week before us that Itai had been killed. And then that obviously didn't bode well for us once we had heard that. But as shocking as it was very shocking, obviously, for them, incredibly shocking. But further tragically, they don't have anything. So they just have nothing to bury. So I think that's, for me, it's hard to imagine somebody not having a grave, knowing your child is deceased and not having a grave. So I think for us, that's something which one has to be thankful for. And we are thankful for. So that was Daniel. We still have to work very, very hard to try and bring his body back, which we are. All the time there's activity, in Israel, around the world, with the Mossad and the Shabak, and putting pressure on different international bodies as well to pressurize Hamas. But it's not the same bringing back, a dead body to bring back somebody alive. In our own tank, we have somebody who was alive and is hopefully still alive. His name is Matan Angrest, the driver of the tank. He was taken alive, and there were many signs of him being alive until a few months ago. There's nothing to the contrary, and we hope and pray that he's still alive. So still a lot to do. Thankfully, our son Jonathan was only lightly to moderately wounded. He also fought in Nachal Oz. He also ended up leaving the house, fighting in Sderot from a few places until he got to Nachal Oz. Ended up being the first soldier officer in Nachal Oz to retake the base. Ended up having the zchut of saving 22 soldiers, 20 female soldiers and 2 male soldiers. And during the battles in Nachal Oz, he himself was shot in the leg, and luckily it didn't shot in the thigh. It missed all of his vital it missed his the main artery in the thigh, which is very dangerous. And thank God he was able to be taken eventually to Soroka Hospital, and he actually got married. 10 days later, we made the very difficult decision to go ahead with a wedding, although Daniel was missing. We just felt it seemed like the right thing to do, and as hard as it was. And Baruch Hashem, we managed to get through the wedding. It was actually a very, very happy wedding, despite having being tinged with some very, very, very painful moments. But it was wonderful. And thank God we have Jonathan, who's healthy and well. And we have Daniel, who unfortunately has happened what has happened. We hope to bring him back. So that's a little bit of the background. I don't know if I'll hand over to you to ask a further question, Lesley. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. You know me, I'm a rabbi. I can just keep talking, no problem.
Right.
And if you want to point me in a certain direction.
As when I introduced you, we can all hear your positive nature and just how inspiring you are. And that is such an important thing. You know, it could have been totally the opposite, that you are inspiring us at your time of need. And also the fact that you decided to go ahead with the wedding, that was something that was unbelievable. And I'm sure, you know, you look back now, say it was definitely the best thing that you could have done at the time. So for the short time that we have left, please share with us some words of chizuk, a message for Rosh Hashanah, how we, the simple people, can move forward and move into the new year at such a challenging time. Yes, we have weeks where we have ups and downs as a country, Israel. So please share with us for the remaining 6-8 minutes that we have some words of Torah or inspiration. New Year.
All right. So as follows. Look, I feel very blessed that I'm able to be positive. It's not something to be taken for granted. I've seen many, many families as a rabbi, trying to hold people's hands through the loss. And in our community in South Africa, quite a few people tragically lost children. And it wasn't easy to try and accompany them through it. And I've learned a lot from, how people have very courageously faced such challenge. Firstly, I feel just grateful that I feel that I'm able to be positive. I just feel it's a blessing. I feel blessed with that. I feel that even though in the depth of the most extreme pain, I see that for some reason that I feel very blessed until this point, it hasn't translated into anger. It hasn't translated into guilt or into blame. And I'm very grateful for that, because sometimes it can, and sometimes that's natural. We know that in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's process of dealing with loss, that so often anger is there's shock, there's anger. It's a healthy way of dealing with things. It's a part of the process. And therefore anger is totally acceptable. For some reason, I haven't until this point felt that. Again, that's not to say that I won't in the future. That's one thing you don't take for granted anything you're feeling now. So I feel very grateful that that's what I feel. I feel grateful that despite the enormous pain, I'm able to sort of process in a way that gives me strength, and hopefully able to give others strength as well. I just feel grateful for that. I think in life, there's that famous adage. I can't remember now if it was the adage of the pastor, what was his name? Vincent Peale. That famous where he says, Lord, help me in life to accept that which I can accept, to change that which I ought to change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And for some reason, I just feel blessed that, I've been able to accept what I can't change, as painful as it's been, and being able to direct my energies to try and change what I can. In the first 163 days, I was able to just try and focus all my angst and anxiety and concern towards action, to do whatever I could to try and bring Daniel back. I just thought during that time that if I don't do that, it's going to paralyze me, and I'm not going to be able to help myself or help him. It was very hard for me during that time. I tried not to think about Daniel as much as I could. I felt bad about that, because I felt that I should be with him in Gaza. He should be in my thoughts the whole time. But I realized when I was doing that, it was just destroying me. I realized that I couldn't function. I was paralyzing myself, and I wasn't able to help him. And therefore, out of love for him, I need to firstly look after myself, be able to look after my family, and then do whatever I can for him. That was hard, because I felt I was paying a price of I felt bad about that my thoughts, I was proactively trying not to think about what he's going through or what he may be going through. But I felt I need to pay that price, otherwise I won't be able to function. And I just feel blessed that I was able to do that. My wife was the one who felt very, very strongly that we should go ahead with the wedding. I was amazed how strongly she felt about it. And I think she was stronger than me during the chuppah and the wedding, which is just amazing. She had this sort of clarity. a very heroic decision that we all made, but she drove it. I'll say like this, in like maybe a final message for the last 4 minutes or so, is to say, firstly, a lot of the ideas that I'm going to share one idea now. I actually put in a booklet. I'm holding up this booklet here. I'll send it to you maybe, Lesley, that we can send it out. I suppose we could even put in the link here, but I'll send it to you and we can send it out to people. It's a booklet that's going to come out. It's basically 64 pages. I've called it Days of Awe in Times of War. It rhymes better if you're a South African. My American friends say Days of Awe in Times of War. It's different, but in South Africa, it sounds good. Days of Awe in times of war. It goes well. So I've tried to, it's not just the Amim Noreim. I've tried to reflect on what we've been through this last year, through the main themes of Rosh Hashanah and the Shofar and Yom Kippur and Tshuva and the Simcha of Sukkot. So there's a lot of themes there. It is going to be distributed with our Mizrachi magazine in English. It's going to be distributed with the Jerusalem Post on Erev Rosh Hashanah as well. So, and in Hebrew as well. So I've tried to, use the Chagim as an opportunity where we're all struggling to process these challenging Chagim. For me, it's very difficult. The last time I davened next to both of my boys was on Rosh Hashanah. It was the last time we were together, the two of them. They were both in the army for Yom Kippur, and then on Sukkot, we saw them at different times. And so the days are punctuated with the last time I davened with both of them to the Simchat Torah, where happened there, what happened. So it's a very difficult time for all of us and also for our family. So I've tried to articulate a lot of these, how to try to cope with this through the main themes of the day. But I'll just share one idea and I'll end with this in the 2 or 3 minutes that we have. And this is the first article over here. I've called the first article Broken Completeness. Broken completeness. This dichotomy of being so broken yet somehow complete, so fractured yet somehow whole. It's this thing I felt the whole year. That on the one hand, we've been so broken by what's happened to our son, but on the other hand, Hashem saved our other son. We could have, God forbid, lost 2 sons, as has happened in other families. So we had a wedding while we had the angst of Daniel. So I just felt this whole year, Hashem's given us this package deal of blessing and curse, almost like it says in this week's parsha. Last week's parsha, we were given the tov and the blessing and the curse, and life and death, and you got to choose life. So I just will say to you one thing, and I'll end with this: is that my father had his 85th birthday a number of months ago, and it was the first time that we got together, all of us. We were all together for his birthday. It was the first time that the whole family was together since our Shiva. And instinctively, my sister said at some point during the evening, she said, "Okay, all the grandchildren come have a picture with Grandpa Gil." And as they all came up, that was the first time we had seen all of the grandchildren without Daniel. And I think my wife just broke down, and I also as well. We had to go out the room and we cried. And my sister came out after me and she said to me, Doron, I'm really, really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. And I said to her something which just sort of came out, and this has been my motto since then. I said to her, Ariella, you've got nothing to be sorry for. You've got nothing to be sorry for. How can we deny Grandpa Gil the opportunity to have a picture with all of his grandchildren? We can't deny him that. But you can't deny us the right to break down and leave the room and cry. And I remember a word came out of my mouth. I said to her, Ariella, it's okay. It's okay. I said, it's so not okay, but it's okay. And that's been my meditation and motto since then. Life will never, ever be okay for anyone who's lost a child. Can never be okay. Kal v'chomer when you've got a child who's supposed to be buried and in Gaza, etc. Life is never okay. But the truth is, it is okay. It is okay. And the line that I've said the whole time is that we live in Hashem's world, not ours. And I think in Rosh Hashanah, God beckons us to choose which world we live in. And the whole of Rosh Hashanah is just to repeat and repeat in all of the prayers that we live in God's world. If we coronate God and we envision, we got to decide which world we live in. And if we live in God's world, somehow everything is okay, even when it's not. And somehow the voice of the shofar, which is a broken shever truah sound, is also a voice of celebration. The word truah in Hebrew, which I explained in the article, means both celebration, Hariul Hashem, and brokenness. And that's what life is. And therefore, as so not okay as things are, and they never will be, they are okay. And in Hashem's world, everything somehow, even if we don't understand it, is okay, and everything is somehow for the best. So it's okay. Yeh beseder. Ma shelo yeh, yeh beseder, b'ezrat Hashem.
Amen. B'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Rav Doron Perez, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your story, for your positive nature, for keeping us going and keeping us inspired during these challenging times. We are all with you. Our thoughts are with you. Our condolences are with you. And our prayers are also with you that all the hostages, including Captain Daniel Perez, will be returned behegdem, as they say, as soon as possible. For those of you that are not joining live, I did post a link in the chat. For anyone that would like to contribute and have a look, the Perez family has formed a scholarship fund. You can go to mizrachi.org/Daniel Perez Fund, and you can have a look, and please contribute to that fund as well. Thank you so much, Rav Perez, again. Thank you for all joining us, whether you joined live or listening to the recording. Am Yisrael Chai, may we all have a Shana Tova, and B'ezrat Hashem, a much easier and happier year than we've had in the past year. Thank you again, and thank you once again, Rav Perez. We were honored to have you with us today. Shana Tova to everyone. Bye-bye.